Turron Davenport from the USA Today joins us here on the Sports Bash, just fresh home from Alabama. How's it down in Alabama at this time of the year?
Oh, man, it was beautiful, man. Nice 50 to 60 degree weather, didn't have to pack the coat, so happy about that. Definitely nice weather and good opportunity to see some football players.
Yeah, and there's a lot down there, and this Senior Bowl, this is kind of, Turron, this is where to kind of quantify how important this is for the Eagles. This is where they kind of fell in love with Carson Wentz last year, right? This is their first opportunity to see him, and that's kind of when they made the decision, we got to figure out how we can get our hands on this guy.
Yeah, it was the trigger pullers. It was their first opportunity to see him live. How we fell in love with him when he saw him, just watching the interaction with the players. And it's big time for especially guys like Carson Wentz, that are coming from FCS schools. This opportunity to go against kind of level up, so to speak, is big for them because it gives them opportunity to prove themselves and show that they do belong.
We know the draft, and we'll get into all the stuff, some of the things you saw. But let's take a look at this team as a whole. Howie was down there. Joe Douglas was down there. They also have, their own stuff to kind of clean up, which is some cap space. They don't have a lot, so you would think, man, they got to really do well in this draft. But do you think they have a goal of trying to clean up some cap space at this time before they get into the draft?
I think like every team, they're going to try to make some moves to clear up some space in case there is that free agent that they do want to sign. These are conversations that Howie said they've had numerous times throughout the season and obviously now. So I think it's something that could happen. Ryan Matthews, I think, is a guy that will probably not be back, as well as Leotis McKelvin. That right there is going to give you $7 million. The kind of borrowing situation, we know what that is, and there's the opportunity to shave another $7 negotiate, so we'll see how that goes. But it just, it's all about upgrading the roster, and to me, it seems like they feel the best way to do that is going to be free agency and the draft, which is understandable. But at the same time, they're going to have to supplement some of the guys that they're leaving. Yeah,
they got a couple interesting decisions to make on their own roster, and then, of course, the draft. And the first look at the prospects, as Turron noted, is down at the Senior Bowl. You saw Howie and Joe Douglas down there, along with Doug Peterson. What were some of the things that you noticed that they kind of were zoning in on?
Well, it was really clear that the DBs and receivers are what they're going to be looking at. I watched Peterson kind of walk up and down the sideline, focusing on the receivers. He was right there at the line of scrimmage, even with it, watching them get off the ball. And that's one of the things I wrote about. He said he wanted to focus on their release and how they're able to get open at the top of their routes. So it was very clear that he was watching that. Howie Roseman was definitely right on top of the defensive backs. I think that must be a position that's one of his favorites because he always goes into detail when you ask him about the defensive backs. So he was right on top of them in one-on-ones and red zone drills, and you could tell that those are the two areas that they're going to be looking at. Jeffrey Lurie was just kind of by the side with them, watching as well, but you saw them really honed in, and as well as Joe Douglas, he talked extensively about Davis White, a guy that I spoke to on Tuesday, and we talked about Jalen Mills and their relationship, and he said that the Eagles have spoken to him, so that's another guy that they're going to be focusing on. Plenty of receivers, whether it be Taywan Taylor, a smaller school kid out of Western Kentucky. Travin, I always mess his name up. Travin Durrell out of LSU. He's another guy, as well as Tabas Scott. So there's a bunch of receivers. Cooper Kupp is another one that Joe Douglas really likes. So there's a group of guys that they're definitely focusing on.
You threw out a couple of names there, Turron Davenport. Tell us a little bit more about some of the guys that stood out and really who the Eagles fans should be keeping an eye on Saturday.
Well, you'll want to keep your eye on the defensive backs, like we mentioned, Davis White. Another guy to watch is DeMonte Casey. He's the guy that I had as one of my sleepers, and it's really good to see the NFL Network and everybody wanted to feature him now. He came out here and showed off for the South squad. Defensive back, breaks on the ball really well. He's a guy that has very smooth backfield transition and that's what break on the ball.
We got some connection problems with Turron Davenport. We'll try to put him on hold and see if we can't clear it up for you there. As he was kind of giving us some good insight.
Starting to learn these names. I need to know.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, these are the guys that you haven't really seen all year long, and you want to know now, who should I start keeping my eye on, right, man? You want to start saying, hey, that's a guy that the Eagles could help the Eagles out. And, he was going down the list of some of the corners. He rattled off a couple of wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing for sure, Pete, I like what he said. He said that it was clear and evident that the Eagles were looking at defensive backs and wide receivers.
Yep, the two positions. Not only were they looking at them, I liked how he said that it was sort of a divide and conquer sort of situation where Howie Roseman likes to look at the secondary guys. He likes to look at the D-back guys, but then Peterson sort of marches down and sees what receivers are standing out, and then Jeffrey Lurie's off to the side. Like, there's the owner. Just he's there, but who knows?
I'll tell you what. Doug Peterson had a terrible look while he was down there. His shirt was like down to his knees. I mean, he had a poor dress look down there while he was, I mean, you're like, this is the coach of the team.
The untucked shirt is very popular now.
Oh, I know. I rocked that, but his was too long.
Is that what it is?
Not that it really matters, but Turron Davenport is back from the Senior Bowl. He had been down there for the last couple of days. All right, Pete, we'll get back into what your question was.
Right. Turron, you were going through some of the names that we're going to look for on Saturday, and I'll just let you continue those names of guys that Eagles fans should look for on Saturday.
Yeah, for the South team, it was DeMonte KZ, a defensive back out of San Diego State. He's a guy who was one of my sleepers coming in, and he's getting a lot of attention now, so you want to look out for him. Justin Evans is a rangy safety. He's a guy that could play some corner too, so he'll probably be in play. On the North team, staying in the defensive backs, you want to look at Rasul Douglas. He's a kid from Jersey, West Virginia. He's a long corner, a guy that has really good ball skills. He uses his hands. He's very physical. So those are guys to look at. Offensive line-wise, there's a local guy. I call him, my little cousin, and that's Julian Davenport out of Bucknell, 6'7", 315. He's a really good player, left tackle. So they want to get depth there. Deion Dawkins out of Temple. Wide receiver-wise, Kupp is really the one to watch. Definitely focus on him. I know he has the attention of Joe Douglas, because Douglas spoke about him a lot. So those are some guys to look out for.
Turron Davenport's with us. I want to go to, a guy like, Douglas. You mentioned him from West Virginia. He was a guy, one of those players that this is that week where guys start to make moves, right? I mean, this is the kind of week where you can be from a fourth rounder to a third, from a third to a second. I mean, are there guys who are making those moves while you're down there seeing? Are there guys that are starting to move up that draft board?
Well, this is when that escalation starts. It really is confirmed at the combine. When those measurables match up with what they saw in person and then what they see on film. So that's when it would happen. I think Douglas is definitely a guy that's moving up, but I think the one that is making himself a lot of money. There's two guys, Kupp, as well as the young man out of North Carolina, Ryan Switzer. He's doing a lot of things down here. Down there, in one-on-ones and just showing himself to always be able to get open. So those are the guys that I think are making money. But there's a bunch of guys. I mean, Jordan Willis out of Kansas State is another one, a pass rusher that he has a lot of moves, and he's very disruptive. He has a really good get-off. He could rush the passer off the edge. Tano Pasino out of Villanova. I tell you what, man, everybody was talking about Forrest Lamp coming into here, and I saw him dominate Forrest Lamp in one-on-ones. He literally grabbed him and threw him out of his way. I saw him beat him in team period 2 more times. And guess what? After that practice, Forrest Lamp didn't come back. So I think he's a guy that made some money, too, just because of his performance against a guy who was considered to be one of the better prospects.
Turron, we all know how poor the Eagles were at wideout this past season. So what are some of the things that Peterson and the Eagles are looking for at that position? Guys who can catch, good hands, playmakers, or all of the above? And do you see the potential for 2 wide receivers maybe to be taken by the Eagles?
Yeah, I think 2 wide receivers will be taken for sure. When you look at just the things that he wants, it's a guy who could get that separation, at the line of scrimmage, at the top of the routes. He wants someone who could track the football, go and get it, and most importantly, secure the catch. I mean, you can't make a play if you don't catch the football, and that's really what he wants. And that's why there's some guys that he's looking at. Like I said, they talked to Tywan Taylor out of Western Kentucky. Zay Jones, the all-time leader in receptions out of East Carolina, is another one they spoke to. He's actually Caleb Jones, who was here in camp earlier this year. You know, it's his younger brother. So there are some guys that fit that mold. I think 100% they draft 2 receivers because they have to add to that unit. And, you know, it's all about adding playmakers. And that's what Howie spoke about on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned a guy like Cooper Kupp, a guy who these guys are kind of emerging, you know, reliable pass-catching guys that, you know, you see them all over the league now, the Beasleys of the world, the Welkers when he was, you know, Edelman, you know, those kind of guys that constantly can make plays, you know, in that slot. The Eagles don't seemingly have that kind of guy. I know, but that puts Jordan Matthews in an interesting position moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Matthews is still going to be their guy that works the slot. He's their possession guy, and I mean, I don't see any risk of him being gone. But, you know, when I look at Cooper Kupp, I don't like to pigeonhole him into the Wes Welker or that type of mold. I look at him as a guy that could win on the outside. You know, people say that he's not fast. I watched him drive a cornerback, break down, and then come back to the football on a curl route and on comebacks. And he catches everything. He's always open. So, I mean, he could win on the inside or the outside. So I don't want to, you know, put him in that Wes Welker, Julian Edelman type of mode because I think he's a bigger-bodied receiver. He's not as quick as them, but he's tough like them and does have the hands. But I think he's his own guy. When I look at him, I think of someone like a Dante Moncrief out of Indianapolis, you know, with the Colts. You know, one of those guys that can go inside or outside. You know, he could work the middle. If you need him to get vertical, he could do that too.
Turron Davenport with us back from the Senior Bowl talking football. And Turron, is wide receiver a position that you see a lot of depth at, that maybe they can grab a guy in round 2 rather than at 14 or 15?
Yeah, I mean, they could grab a guy in round 2, 3, or 4. I mean, you look at Tabas Scott, he's someone that'll probably be around 3. That he has so much ability and his personality. I interviewed him on Tuesday, and we just talked about how much he loves the game and just how he has a running back background. And when he gets the football, he's thinking score, not get the first down. He wants to score. And I really like that out of a receiver. And he's definitely a guy. I mean, you look at Katie Cannon, he's someone that you could get probably in the 3rd round. Dede Westbrook is a 2nd-round guy who was supposed to be there but didn't come. There's so many guys. I mean, this receiver class is very deep. I mean, we haven't even talked about Stacey Coley out of Miami, a speed guy. You know, you got Jalen Robinette out of Air Force, a guy that averaged 23 yards per catch in that triple option scheme. There's so many guys. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, there's a good 15 guys that will at some point have some type of impact. But really, when you're looking at this position, like Howie said, and like I've been saying all year, the 2014 class, man, with Odell and you know, Brandon Cooks and Mike Evans and all those guys, they really changed the way people evaluate the position, and you expect success immediately instead of letting a guy like an Aguilar develop like you're supposed to. And I think that's something you have to keep in mind, the development process when you're looking at these receivers.
So a lot of names at the wideout position, but how about at corner? Is there a lot of depth there, or do they have to go and get a guy in round 1?
The corner is crazy deep. You know, you don't have to get a guy in round 1. My top corner is Sidney Jones out of Washington, but you have later guys like DeMonte Casey, I mentioned, like Kevin King out of Washington. You have guys that are at the Senior Bowl, you know, from a small school like a Tennessee State. Ezra Robinson, he's about 6'1", you know, in the 180-pound range. Very similar to Antonio Cromartie, the long arms, the ball skills, the speed. So you could get guys. I mean, this cornerback group is deep. Last week, Joe Douglas, he had a lot of interest in Ashton Lampkin out of Oklahoma State, Treston Deku out of Oregon State, as well as Paul Moreau, a guy who was mistakenly pegged in the 1st round by Daniel Jeremiah. But they had interest in those guys. I mean, there are so many corners. I could see 6 guys going in the 1st round, which would be a really remarkable feat for that position.
You like Sidney Jones, you know, as your top guy, which is interesting because you could look at a lot of different lists and see guys all over the map. I guess that's a testament to how much depth is really in that position, which is good news for Philadelphia because, like Pete asked you, can they get, do you see them taking 2 receivers? You would almost imagine they have to take 2 corners.
Yeah, they're going to need depth at the cornerback position. I mean, that's for sure what they're going to need. And it's just one of those things where, you identify the personnel that you have and how you want to supplement what you have on the roster.
Turron Davenport, at @Davenport_NFL. You wrote about Joe Douglas saying he wants to add tough guys in the draft. And, when you hear tough guys, a lot of times you think offensive line, but you would think they did their job on the offensive line last offseason. Where do they need to add these tough type of players?
Oh, well, I mean, you want a tough player at every position. It's not just the offensive line. A linebacker, you need toughness. But I think they're looking specifically at the cornerback position. But, one of that article is written more with the mindset that they're looking for in whatever guy they draft. There isn't a specific position that they're looking for that with. But when you look at characteristics and traits, when Douglas was in Baltimore with Ozzie Newsome and DeCosta and those guys, it was all about getting guys who loved football, guys who were hard-nosed, guys who are mentally and physically tough, because this NFC East division is turning back into a division that's kind of a black and blue type of division, which is what the AFC North was with the Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, and Browns. So Joe Douglas has that type of mindset in his mind when he's evaluating a player, and that's what he wants from him.
You talk about the NFC East, Turron, with the Ezekiel Elliott success and the way he played this season. Is there a stud running back on the board at 14 or 15? Do you take somebody there if he's the best available player, or do you go corner or wideout?
I think if a guy like a Fournette or obviously Dalvin Cook are there, I think you definitely consider them. It's really going to be the best player available in type of situation. Joe Douglas did say that having a game-changing back can have really big, influence on your team's success. But I tell you what, there's a guy from BYU that's pretty much, he's not as explosive as Cook, but he's right there, and I think he needs to be in a conversation. And that's Jamal Williams, and he's a guy you'll see on Saturday really show what he could do as well.
A couple of your favorite guys you saw down there, if you're just saying, watch these couple guys, for your favorite team, if there's somebody listening that's just not an Eagles fan, who are some of your favorite, prospects for this game?
Well, I tell you what, man, Ryan Switzer, he's a pleasure to watch, man. Just the way he works his release, the way he works through, his routes. He's really fun to watch, but I'm going to look at some of these big guys, man. Jordan Willis, like I said, he's a pass rusher that's really fun to watch. Who else? Tanzel Smart out of Tulane. He's a little fire hydrant built type of guy, man. And he does not give up any ground at the line. He's feisty too, So that would probably be some of the guys I will watch. Donnell Pumphrey, he's probably my favorite prospect in this whole draft. He's a guy I really like. I mean, he was giving up 50 pounds to guys like Bullware from Clemson and just stonewalling them in pass pro drills and giving them work in one-on-ones. He's a dynamic playmaker, and he's someone that the Eagles did show interest also. But just overall, Pumphrey will probably be the one I would look out for the most.
Hey, Turron, typically we're having conversation about who the quarterbacks are. Any of them stand out down there?
You know what? I tell you, Josh Dobbs had a strong week. He definitely looked good, just throwing on the move, making those sideline throws, throwing the ball down the field. But there's another guy out of Tiffin named Antonio Pipkin that really delivers the ball very well on the seam routes. He's a bit late on some of his throws, but he definitely makes it happen. And just thinking of him, just pop two tight ends into mind. Ingram out of Ole Miss is definitely one to watch. O.J. Howard's going to put on a show. Rest assured, he's going to put on a show. The tight ends are actually the strongest group at the Senior Bowl, because there's another guy from Toledo, Michael Roberts, 270-pounder. He caught 16 touchdowns last year, and he's a guy that they use kind of like in the backfield as well as flexing or in line. So there's a good 6 tight ends. Gerald Everett from South Alabama is another one. I mean, this is a deep tight end group here at the Senior Bowl, and it's a deep group overall draft-wise, and you'll see some guys put on a show on Saturday.
Looking forward to that. Love the draft conversation, and I know a lot of Eagles fans will be watching wideouts and corners, possibly running back there, as Turron, you mentioned a couple, and also, I guess, pass rusher, too. You got to start thinking about someone on the other side of Brandon Graham.
Yeah, pass rusher, like I said, Jordan Lewis is a guy that they or Willis, excuse me. Jordan Willis is a guy that they spoke to. I talked to him yesterday, and he told me that, and he said he would be very comfortable rushing from the wide line, 9 alignment. He has a really nice spin move, and he's long, so he would be a really good option. You watch that game, Kansas State versus Texas A&M, and that's a game where you'll see 3 pass rushers, and I tell you what, the one that everybody has ranked first is the third best in that game.
Good stuff, Turron Davenport. Just back from Alabama. I heard you got delayed by somebody. Rerouted.
Yeah, Mr. Trump, they rerouted us to Harrisburg, and we had to refuel and then sat on the runway for about 40 minutes while he taxied. Yeah, it is what it is,
Hey, you know what? When you're down there getting to watch football in the beautiful weather, you're going to hit some bumps on the way home, right? You had a nice week down there in Mobile, and we appreciate you sharing the knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. Like one of my followers on Twitter said, make America late again.
Good stuff.
Take care, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.